Marlon Brando is dead. In wake of his passing, imitators appear. Marlon Brando, Marlon Brandy, Brandon Brando, Marlon R. Method. Low-budget producers churn out sequels. Martin Brando stars in Second to the Last Tango in Paris. Brenda Brando stars in The Godfather 4, Godmother's Revenge. There's Another Streetcar Named Desire, Return of a Streetcar Named Desire, Return of the Revenge of a New Streetcar Named Desire. Existing footage is duped and dubbed into a dizzying array of Brando exploitation flicks. Outtakes from Superman appear in Marlon's Deadly Method. Screen test footage from One-Eyed Jacks crops up in an unauthorized science fiction sequel, Five-Eyed Jacks. Frequent co-star Carl Malden appears in a dozen of Brandon exploitation movies, occasionally sporting a tiny Hitler mustache for reasons no one can explain. So many of these movies are made that eventually exploitation distributors can assemble entire movies just by cutting and combining their pre-existing knockoffs. Now, imagine that Marlon Brando is Bruce Lee and you have a snapshot of the Bruceploitation industry. I wanted to start with a quote from a fantastic kung fu book I read last year, These Fists Break Bricks, written by Chris Poggiali and Grady Hendrix. I love Bruceploitation. It's a strange, fascinating era in genre filmmaking, the like of which we probably will never see again. After Bruce Lee's passing on the 20th of July 1973, a new wave of exploitation cinema swept China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and fell into the grindhouses of America. The Bruceploitation movement. There were hundreds, and I do mean hundreds of movies released, capitalising on the success and wealth and fame of Bruce Lee, including Game of Death. Originally Bruce's passion project, he had filmed several scenes of the film before he passed away, only for director Robert Klaus to take the footage and turn it into a film about a martial artist movie star faking his own death. It's a weird cornerstone of genre cinema, and I thought it'd be fun to expose Stephen to a few movies tonight. We watched 3 movies for this episode to get a taste, a flavour of the type of weird and wonderful exploitation cinema that emerged in the mid to late 70s. Welcome to the Bruceploitation special. Stephen, Bruce Lee's dead.
Hello, I'm Stephen. I've watched more Bruceploitation flicks than I've watched Bruce Lee movies.
These are two completely different beasts. Like, I don't revisit Bruce Lee movies that often, but I will watch a ton of Bruceploitation movies just because they are two completely different beasts.
Again, I'm now more versed in the latter, so I'm more of a Bruceploitation. I've seen 2 Bruce Lee movies, and I've seen 3 Bruceploitation movies.
Well, even one
of
Bruce Lee's own movies, Game of Death, is a Bruceploitation movie. He's in the movie, but half of it he is not in the movie. It's in the Criterion box set of the official Bruce Lee canon, so Bruceploitation is Bruce Lee.
Although I guess I've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I guess is also a Bruceploitation movie. So
there's different types. This is like the 70s era of Bruceploitation, where it very much is billing and conning people into thinking Bruce Lee is in this movie, even though he died several years ago. But like it's echoed throughout cinema history. Even like Why Don't You Play in Hell? That is leaning heavily on Bruceploitation.
Yes. No, true. Great movie.
Enter the Fat Dragon with Donnie Yen from a couple of years. That's Bruceploitation. There's so much Bruceploitation stuff, and it's wild to think that they got away with this. This is a thing that happened. There are hundreds.
It's like Titanic 2, isn't it? Turns out you can just make a movie and call it Titanic 2.
Exactly, and like
turns out you can just do that.
We'll talk about like the bootleg nature of some of these movies, because like the needle drops, the characters, like the IP properties that they use. It's like you would never get away with this stuff this day and age, but that's the 70s, that's distribution circuits, that's all sorts of good stuff.
And even from these 3, we've got 3 different approaches to how you can exploitate a Bruce, I guess. So the first one that I watched was Soul Brothers. So I watched them in vague chronological order. But there were 2 from 1977, so I just watched the first one that you'd listed.
Good year.
So I started with Soul Brothers of Kung Fu. Soul Brothers of Kung Fu, which the guy is made to look like Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee,
but then Bruce Lee becomes part of the
the narrative. Yeah,
the narrative is that he's inspired by. Yeah, he died young and was great, and therefore he can inspire to greatness, aspire like him.
So that's one route. That's one route. You can either be like, oh, I loved the idea of Bruce Lee. I'm a fan of Bruce Lee. Or you can be like, no, I'm playing Bruce Lee. We're going to dance around the fact that I am not Bruce Lee, but I am playing Bruce Lee.
I mean, there was that guy in that JCB whose dad was Bruce Lee. Is that a Bruceploitation?
The first Bruceploitation UK #1. I'm sorry that went to #1. That was all over the radio in 2005.
Yeah. That's alienated most listeners. They're like, what the hell are they referencing? I'm not going to explain. You have to bing that disparate chain of words.
JCB Bruce Lee.
Yeah, Bruce Lee. There you go. So then the next one was The Dragon Lives Again, which is literally someone playing Bruce Lee.
That is very much like one of the more famous, wacky Bruceploitation
really
movies,
enjoyable.
just because it is that bootleg nature of filmmaking. It is, what can we get away with? What can we shoot inside like a week? What ideas do you have? It doesn't matter. You don't have to refine them. We'll put all of them in. If you want to see Dracula, if you want to see Popeye, that's fine. I've got a guy who's got a corncob pipe and he can play Popeye. I
think like Soul Brothers is a better film, but I think Dragon Lives Again was the best of the three.
It's more entertaining. I'd say it's just like for wow factor. For
it's just such a great concept.
WTF
the conceit
factor.
is brilliant.
I love. So, which one do you want to talk about first? Because
should we talk about the last one? Because I don't really have that much to say about it. And then the last one, Bruce and the Iron Finger, kind of like pretends that it is
interesting. It's
Bruce Lee.
Yeah, also pretends it's Bruce Lee
because the character is called Bruce Lee, but Lie.
Because we don't want any copyright infringement. We don't want lawsuits for this. Like
no.
It's a sort of like a murder mystery giallo type movie, but gets down and dirty with like the sort of backyard kung fu shenanigans that you come to expect from these sort of films. There isn't really much in the way of standout features of this film, I'd say. It kind of bleeds into some of the other ones I've seen. It's fine.
It was fine, was my takeaway of being like, it was not as remarkable as the other two, but the other two weren't remarkable in ways that were brilliant, more remarkable in ways that were interesting, but this is fine.
They all have their strengths and weaknesses in very weird strokes.
My takeaway at the end of it was more like, my review of this one was more like a review of like the genre as a whole, of being like, it's like a bag of sweets in that there are slightly different flavours, but you're eating the same sweet each time, and that's kind 100%. Of the appeal, is like, that you're like, and it's not great for you, but it's fun, it's a treat and whatever, and it's probably actually quite bad and exploitative, but there's probably cane sugar in it, and it's probably destroying part of the world somewhere, deeply irresponsible, but you're like, I enjoyed it, I ate it, it was fun.
It's crazy because there are 5, 6 Bruce Lee movies and maybe 200 official. I'm citing official because in my hand I hold Re-Enter the Dragon. This is Genre Theory, Bruceploitation, and the Sleazy Joys of Lowbrow Cinema, written by Stuart Home, and he identifies his own sort of cinematic canon of Bruceploitation, and he narrows it down to, I think, 64 official Bruceploitation ones.
I think an important taxonomy of Bruceploitation is very important work to do.
It's very, very strange how this man has dedicated his pretty much his entire life to hundreds and hundreds of fake movies or fake movie star movies.
Yeah. Are there really that few Bruce Lee movies?
Enter the Dragon, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Game of Death.
So most of the things on his like IMDb or Letterboxd list is that stuff where he's used in documentaries and footage of him is used in. Interesting. Because you look at it and it says, Act 76 films. I just presumed it was in more.
No, he's very much... he's in, like, early stuff as, like, a child actor. But the ones people think of when they think of Bruce Lee, and there's 6. There is Fist of Fury, Enter the Dragon, Way of the Dragon, The Big Boss, Game of Death, and then Game of Death 2, sort of the unfinished.
So, how does that make sense then? If you're telling me that he's partly not in Game of Death, then how is there a Game of Death 2 that he's partly in?
Oh no, that's more archive footage, I'd imagine.
Okay, so he is only in half of Game of Death, and there's a Game of Death sequel.
Yeah, because he died before he died before they could finish it, so they just changed the movie entirely. Like, it's so obvious, the transition between real footage and fake footage. Like, it's like watching the TV bumper Looney Tunes specials where they would use classic 40s shorts and then animate stuff in the 80s to make it look like it was like wraparound stuff. It's so funny.
So,
but yeah, there are five real Bruce Lee movies, and one of them is a fake.
Are Way of the Dragon and The Big Boss worth watching? Are they good?
Yes, yeah, I think very much so. One, he fights Chuck Norris in a Coliseum.
Yeah.
So this is when I talk about the sort of the philosophy of Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee movies all follow very similar traits. They're all about sort of reservation, stoicism for the first hour or so. He never fights. Bruce Lee's philosophy was always about the fighting without the art of fighting without actually fighting.
That makes sense that he exploitated then, because I'd say the Bruceploitation movies are about all fighting all the time.
All fights all the time, which is why I always gravitate back to Bruceploitation
rather
than Bruce Lee movies. It's like
you can chuck it on the background.
You watch The Big Boss, and he is just sort of like a city boy who moves to the country to work on like this ice packaging farm, and he's going to slowly unearth this like corruption, and you're like, I can't wait for Bruce Lee to kick someone. And it doesn't happen to like an hour in, and like the fights last seconds because it's Bruce Lee. He's like the world's best kicker.
It's like Lenana or a yak in the classroom, isn't it? Being like, is there going to be a yak in the classroom? Eventually there is a yak in the classroom.
Chekhov's
Eventually
Bruce
there is
Lee.
a game of death. You know, the game of death does happen. But for a while, the game of death is the friends we make along the way.
The Bruce Lee stuff, like the Bruce Lee shot stuff in Game of Death is actually really, really good. And the Criterion box set, they put out I think it's Game of Death Redux version, which is just those 30 minutes that Bruce initially shot, cobbled together. And that's really, really good. And you can find that online places and in the Criterion set. But yeah, Bruceploitation is just sort of, okay, step one, tick. We have someone who looks a bit like Bruce Lee. And even if we don't, we can put some sunglasses on him.
The films that I watched, they do not.
Like The Dragon Lives Again, we open and Bruce Lee is dead, but he's just a man wearing sunglasses because Bruce Lee used to wear sunglasses, and it's such a funny, cheap way of being like, hey, it's the guy from Enter the Dragon.
The moment he takes off his sunglasses, I'm like, that's not Bruce Lee. When he's got them on, I'm like, this is kind of like a Bubba Hotep, kind of like, okay, yeah, I kind of got this. And then it's like, no, that is it's just a man. It's just a man.
Dragon Lives Again opens with like dedicated to the millions of Bruce Lee fans across the globe, which is cool. But it's also just sort of like, you're a fan of Bruce Lee and the ideas of Bruce Lee. Well, you're going to get some of that, but really you're getting a whole different beast. Well, like this
that goes
sort
back
of
to
immoral...
my half question kind of point then, because it's like a pseudo question, because I know the answer is like yes, but this is very much. This genre then is an adaptation of the idea of Bruce Lee, then, isn't it? It's an adaptation of his essence and fame as opposed to what he actually was.
Like a screen presence. So I'd love to dive into more sort of actor-exploitation. Fan fiction, yeah. Jackie Chan also had a wave of transploitation, even though he was still alive, and still very much is alive, touch wood. I want to talk about one of the weirder sides of actor-exploitation that you might be aware of or you might not be aware of. John Travolta exploitation.
Okay, I mean, I think he exploitated his own career after a while. But...
yeah. I think it was like a 70s Italian movie off the back of Saturday Night Fever. They just found a guy who looked a bit like John Travolta and made like this disco-themed movie, and it's the only John Travolta exploitation movie to exist. It's just wild that these things exist, but it's something that we don't get. One of the questions I had for you tonight was, if you could create an exploitation subgenre capitalizing on the success of one actor in cinema history, who would you choose? If we could imagine hundreds of films ripping on like an actor or a famous character that an actor has played, like a Clint Eastwood exploitation, which there probably is in the spaghetti western world, come to think of it.
I mean, there's the obvious answer, which is Malkovich exploitation.
Ooh, that would be very interesting.
But that's too obvious an answer, because we already have like the first in that genre to merge now, and we know that everyone does want to. If they could pick one actor, they would. My cheat is it's Bruceploitation, but that Bruce is Bruce Campbell.
Ooh, like loads and loads of Evil Dead clones and Army of Darkness.
I would argue that Brain Dead is Bruceploitation.
Like Ashploitation.
Yeah,
like
Ashploitation.
Ash, the character. Just sort of an expanded universe of
Liv Ullman's exploitation. A lot of
Bergman exploitation. Loads of like Persona,
like, sad women.
Persona 2.
Sad women having conversations about the human condition. Would be kind of cool. Yeah.
Ugh. So the dragon lives again. Bruce Lee, fake Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
He's dead. He goes to hell, obviously. I love there's a throwaway line when it's like, when people die, their bodies and face undergo changes.
Yes,
and
I love
it's
that.
just the filmmakers being like, phew, right, we got that out of the way. This guy doesn't really look like Bruce Lee.
Well, I do love the conceit, though, because it's like the rest of being like, how's Bruce Lee here? Bruce Lee's dead. And this is like, Bruce Lee is dead. So this is set in the afterlife. Like,
there's the other one.
Clever.
Bruce Lee fights back from the grave, which
Nice.
is nowhere near as interesting as it sounds, but has one of the best posters in all of cinema.
The two films that come to mind, obviously, with this one are Ready Player One and Space Jam 2.
Yes, yeah, which is just, how many things can we put in there?
Yeah, which that shows you that, like, this idea of the big crossover can be just this, like, the most cynical of corporate events. Or it can be a kind of lad goodbye style, why not throw everything in? This shows that crossovers and the idea of the public domain is such a fascinating idea for creativity and for fun, as opposed to corporate cash-in of, look, it's the Iron Giant fist-bumping the devils.
These are the things we own.
The nuns from the devils.
These are the things we own in our, the corporate structure. Whereas here it's very much sort of like sandbox filmmaking, action figures. What do we have at our disposal? What costumes could we accurately depict? Can we get Emmanuel and Dracula? So that's another thing. I was expecting a couple more like Universal horror staples to show up. That would have been fun. Like a couple Frankensteinians or an Invisible Man. That would have been an easy one. Fake Bruce Lee fighting the Invisible Man.
Yeah, it's a weird mix, isn't it? Because it's like no discernible logic that connects them. I mean, one of the characters is just Exorcist.
Audiences at the time were looking and being like, "Oh, it's the man with no name. That's Clint Eastwood. Okay, that's played by Emmanuel." Who's drawn to The Dragon Lives Again and being like, "Oh, finally, an Emmanuel representation on screen."
Finally, she's not in space.
My other question I have was, what is sort of like a pop culture character that you would like Bruce Lee to fight in this movie? Pre 1977. So you could have a Star Wars, you could have a Darth Vader in there thrown in. I'll let you have that.
Probably Hitler from The Triumph of the Will.
That was good because I was thinking Great Dictator, Chaplin, or just the Tramp, just beating up silent black and white Charlie Chaplin.
Or crossover to Ashes to Classics. Emil Jannings, the German actor who I found out just yesterday, was a Nazi.
Oh
so
no!
I guess any of Emil Jannings' characters. Just be on that guy. Turns out he's a Nazi.
But yeah, there's some wild needle drops across all of these films. Like one of them starts with the Rocky theme.
So the first one we watched, which was
Soul Brothers of
Kung Fu. Which actually, while we say that, my favourite thing about all these films is all the dubs obviously go from a different time of British pronunciation, where it was
everyone sounds like Eric Idle.
Kung Fu. Kung Fu is how it's said every time.
Yeah.
It's not Kung Fu. It's Kung Fu.
It's accented on the up rather than the down.
Rather than I am. I should know what it is. But yeah, it is, the meter is opposite around in a way that's really, really strange. And obviously it's just like that word is used differently in the dialect. Just love that. But yeah, so Soul Brothers of Kung Fu begins with the Rocky theme, which is I guess why I then have been watching a bunch of Rocky movies.
That makes sense. That's that earworm you're trying to get rid of.
Genuinely why.
That's so good.
And uses it a few times, just punctuate action, and there's a little bit of Live and Let Die.
Live and Let Die. So, I looked up from my laptop. I was like, what is that? Like, how? It's just so strange.
What does it matter to me? It's Live and Let Die. It's Live and Let Die. I'm just that orchestral sting.
You just know that they're not paying for anything, and they're just going through whatever like record library they've got in the studio, or whoever's basement they're editing this bad boy in.
The thing I liked about Soul Brothers of Kung Fu is that it decided to be a new movie every act.
Genuinely, they shot 2 endings for this movie. And
it feels like it. Did I watch both of them?
And like I watched online on the YouTube on like the Wu-Tang collection, which sort of
which stops every minute.
And like the quality shifts and the transfer seems to skip. It seems to be like this sort of Frankenstein's monster of a movie, just sort of pulling from different sources. It's just, I would love a box set of some of these films sometime, but I don't know how that would work rights-wise. Who owns the rights to Bruce Lee's likeness?
The important cinema folk would be our biggest hope on that.
Gold Ninja Videos, Bruceploitation. They did do a release of Dragon Lives Again, actually, one of their first runs, which sadly sold out way before I found out about them.
So this movie starts out very definitively as a kind of like pseudo Fist of Fury, let's fight racism with kung fu.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, like it's there for a couple minutes. Like it introduces the character, and then we just sort of
like,
run
what
with
if
it.
we were not that film at all?
No,
so
we introduce another subplot and then another subplot.
Then it's a tournament movie. Then it's he becomes the best person in the world because why not? And then it's a revenge movie, but the revenge is orchestrated for like a minute of being like it's just because he won't let because the person who isn't Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee, Let Sleeping's Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee won't let his friend marry someone that he loves, so
it's very convoluted.
Therefore, that person is the villain. And Bruce Lee is the victim here, and he gets a wife so she can die. Quite
the Christopher Nolan method.
Exactly. What was I watching recently? And the Mission Impossible movies where they just
lots of dead wives in there,
giving him partners so they can die, and then they forget that they're dead, or bring them back, or they forget to bring them back.
20 years time, we'll have Tom Cruise exploitation. I can feel it. We'll have Mission Impossible 9.
Yeah.
Actually, that's probably not that far off. What are we up to? 7, 6?
There are Jesus Christ! I just watched them, so there are.
It's
7
impossible to
currently.
count. Impossible to count.
Well, because I get them confused because they've all got the same name, and generally 4 through 6 is just what if we just made the same film again and again.
I will rewatch before the new one comes out in summer, but a lot of them
the
blur.
next one is 7, isn't it? Let me see if I can name them. I bet I can't.
Mission Impossible.
My attempt. Mission Impossible.
Mission
Impossible 2.
John Wick.
MI3.
Yep.
Then it's Ghost Protocol.
Yep.
Rogue Nation.
And
then Fallout
4
so
New
6.
Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah, Fallout 4 New Vegas. Put your hands up for Detroit. Fallout 4 New Vegas. And then Ghost Babel, whatever the next one is called.
Ghost Babel? Is that what it's called?
No, that's the name of the Metal Gear Solid Game Boy game.
Oh, very good.
That's for the chads out there.
So yeah, put Tom Cruise in a Bruceploitation movie where Bruce Lee gets to kick him to death. That'd be fun.
Is there... Are these movies still made? Are people still Bruceploiting?
I say no, but I mean, we mentioned earlier, like, why don't you play in hell? If I pull up, I feel like there are some contemporary films that definitely lean into it, but I feel like they're not as prominent as everywhere as they were in the 70s, just because it was so fresh and new. When did he die? 73. I think there was like a 10-year period, the golden age, I'd call, of Bruceploitation, where everyone and anyone was making.
Bruce is hot.
Jackie Chan himself starred in a Bruceploitation film.
Oh, really cool.
I think it's Fist of Fury 2 or like New Fist of Fury or one of those, just like a classic thing.
More fists, more fury.
The thing I like about Bruceploitation is some of them carve out their own identity and don't actually, tread the path of Bruce Lee and be like, I'm just a Bruce Lee. Like Bruce Lee, the star of Soul Brothers of Kung Fu, kind of carved out his own career being a Bruce Lee impersonator, but then found sort of his own identity. On the Kung Fu Recommendations podcast, I mentioned Chinese Stuntman, which is his directorial debut, I think, and he's very much his own person in that he's not just harkening on Bruce Lee. And there's another one called the Gold Connection, which is just like has nothing to do with Bruce Lee. That's fully a Bruce Lee movie, and it's just strange that there was like the fallout of the fallout. So Bruce Lee died, we made loads of films capitalizing on him, and then people had careers off the back of that and tried to make their own name. But like these films just fall into weird different subgenres and like are comedy movies, they're action movies, some of them are mysteries. I've yet to find the Bruce Lee musical yet, but I will find it.
The conversation or the kind of like view of Bruce Lee has shifted, I would say. It seems that very much in the contemporary view was kind of like really efficient and really impressive martial arts style that led to like a rise in martial arts movie. And I think as kind of like seen by the reaction to the Bruce Lee estate to Once Upon a Time Hollywood, the cultural impact of Bruce Lee is seen in a different way, and it's like a revered figure outside of just he beat up dudes really well in some movies, and these films very much capitalize on that guy beat up dudes really, really well.
Yeah, it completely disregards the central philosophies of Bruce Lee.
But I guess maybe that took a while to become the cultural currency of Bruce Lee as a figure.
It's probably through. You do get quite a lot of his philosophy through his characters and his performances in those 5 films.
What context for those films being watched in as well? Is it like, did you see them like once in like a rep theatre and be like, oh, that was really, really fun, I remember those fight scenes, as opposed to now we've got books around it, you can rewatch them, you can connect the dots, as opposed to I saw Enter the Dragon randomly on like a Friday night.
Yes, and now I want to see anything with this man in. It probably 100% would be like, that's the reason we can't get exploited in this sense now, is because you can just be like, is Bruce Willis in that? Googled it and be like, no, that's not a real Bruce Willis movie. Whereas in the 70s, you'd be like, you see a poster that says Bruce Lee and the Iron Finger, and you go, well, Bruce Lee's in it. Why would they lie to me? Why would a poster lie to me?
It's that Asylum Pictures idea, isn't it?
Oh, God.
So I guess the closest we've got to that is that film Devotion, is it? That came out this year that looks like Top Gun but isn't.
I mean, there are, to be fair, that is the closest we get to exploitation movies, is the asylumification of cinema, where you'll get movies like Dune World or like Space Wars Rise of the Underminer or something to capitalise on all the big budget stuff. And they pump them out. Like, I don't know if it's Sci-Fi or Asylum or whoever's doing them, but there is a market for them somehow.
Clearly, the film Devotion is a different film to Top Gun Maverick, clearly, from the description, because it says, the harrowing true story of 2 elite US Navy fighter pilots during the Korean War. Their heroic sacrifices would ultimately make them the Navy's Pacific wingman. But look it up on Letterboxd now and look at the vault poster.
Look at the poster and you look at the banner image, and that is very much Top Gun exploitation.
Yeah, and the movie clearly isn't that, but they're moving like, this movie was popular. It's like, what if our poster had a guy with aviators on it?
Or you think that maybe J.D. Dillard had been working on this tirelessly for years and years, and just he was like, oh no, Top Gun's coming out this year. It's a real Ants Bugs Life situation.
Yes,
maybe Top Gun Maverick is actually ripping off Devotion, and we never know.
Deep Impact to my Armageddon.
Yeah.
It's 2 volcano movies as well. Yeah, this is the multiple movies, but I think Devotion. I think it's an Amazon movie. I'm not sure.
I have no idea. I will not watch that.
I didn't like Top Gun.
Exactly, I didn't like Top Gun Maverick that much. I didn't really want to find Top Gun Maverick exploitation. Whereas Bruce Lee movies, I like. I love Bruce Lee movies, but Bruceploitation, it gives me a different flavour of sort of cinema that I have to sometimes. You know, the grindhouse, the seedy, the snarky, the weird, the wonderful. When you compare it to the stoic levels of Bruce Lee, where you're like, God, this guy's really good at kicking, but I wish he'd kick more and kick Dracula.
This is very reductive, and it maybe looks poor on me, and maybe reflects maybe my bad relationship with media, and the way that I think about media. But there is a joy sometimes in putting a film on where you go, I know this is going to be a 3-star film. It's going to be 90 minutes, and I'm just going to enjoy it.
I think, especially with us in our film circles, we spend way too much time thinking and talking about movies that sometimes it's just nice to sit back and be like, this is going to be just movie. This is going to be movie. I'm gonna dedicate 90 minutes to watching what these people put on screen, and I'm going to have a time with it. And that for me is movies like
The Dragon Lives. 75% of myself to 90 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, that is Dragon Lives Again for me, where you look up every 30 seconds to be like, where are those skeletons?
Oh wow,
where are those skeletons come from?
Is that a werewolf? Yeah. Of the 3, I think Soul Brothers is maybe the most interesting as a film. I thought the last one was just a little bit too conventional, but fine. Occasionally wild things happen. But yeah, Lives Again is just... The execution is nowhere near as good as the premise.
No, which is so funny as well, which is also part of the appeal as well, because that is also the bootleg exploitation nature of this movie. Of this looks like it was shot under a week. We needed so many retakes. We definitely just hired some of these guys for a day. Let's get this movie done. Let's get it in the theaters, like the pipeline method of film distribution. It feels like a fake
movie in a movie.
Yeah,
it feels
absolutely.
Like the Grindhouse trailers in the middle of Grindhouse. This is just like, you're like, this isn't a real thing, but there's like 90 minutes of it. Yeah,
Robert Rodriguez's Dragon Lives Again.
I'm liked this dive into this. This is the different side of the schlocky B movie that I wanted.
There's nothing quite like this. It's just, it's wild that it exists, and it's wild that there's just so much of it as well. And like occasionally I'm just in the mood for... as you say, a 3-star movie that I can have some fun with the action choreography and also just have this sort of baffled look on my face. Like, they got away with this. This is something I can watch. Bruce Lee doesn't know the weird fallout he's had.
I would like to see what the estate have to say about this, or if they ever commented publicly. Especially
that'd be a very interesting thing, actually, because I mean, like, these movies have been out as long as Bruce has been dead, so you'd think that they'd try and put a stamp down, or try and collect some
I guess
sort
they don't need to be stamped on, because like it doesn't really exist anymore, and they were never really like a rights thing anyway, because God knows who's making.
No, it's just quick. These are just quick, like money makers. Just like how can we turn a quick dime? We can film this. We've got loads, like the Kung Fu boom of the 70s. Everyone was a martial artist. Like Peking opera schools were booming. There were people coming out. You could make them look like Bruce Lee in an instant. And you could put together a script in a minute and get a movie out and distributed in like a week.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. I know you won't appreciate this. I know it's not a question that you probably want to answer, because I know you do like the film quite a lot. But what did you think of the Bruce Lee scene in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I mean, it's a fantasy sequence, which I will always point back to. It's Cliff Booth's fantasy sequence, and the more I have learnt about Bruce Lee over the years, and his role within the Hollywood system and the Hollywood scene, and the man was rather arrogant when he came over to the West, and he wanted to do things on his own terms. He refused to be in movies unless he could have creative control. He was he's very good, but he knew he was very good. And I know that Tarantino knew that, and that's what he was tapping into in that scene. Okay. Is it a bit tasteless and a bit sort of, stomping on a dead man's legacy? Sure. Does it play for laughs in the scene? Sure. I like it.
I was intrigued seeing. I mean, no, but I also didn't like the film. So, like, it being like, and I do get your read about fantasy thing, but I think that film has its cake and eats it when it's just like, because it can always go about like anything. It's like, well, but anything also could not be fantasy at the same time. Like,
true.
There's a strange narrative between the projected realities, and I think there's characters in that film live their personas through their projected realities anyway. So even if it is fantasy, that is what that character is.
Okay, interesting.
And that is a fantastical extension of the kind of person they are, and is why I don't really like that. It's the same way as there's that joke about him killing his wife because she nags, and I'm like, this seems to be fantastical, but also it is this character. And I view both scenes in the same way.
Interesting. Part of me wonders if Once Upon a Time in Hollywood opened up the idea of Bruce Lee again to the masses, because recently it was announced that Ang Lee is doing a Bruce Lee movie starring Ang Lee's son as Bruce Lee, and
I would love to see Jet Li in an Ang Lee film playing Bruce Lee.
Now that'd be very good, and that poster would be just a mess. Like, hats off to the graphic designer who has to design that. But yeah, Bruce Lee, the immortal Bruce Lee. It's strange for a man who only had 5 films to have such a lasting legacy. It's like, I say, like Jack Tati. Jack Tati is not as well known as Bruce Lee. But in our circles, he
just
is.
men falling over.
Has there ever been a small body of work that's had such a lasting impression, or such a just at the forefront of pop culture for this long?
Who's that actor? I mean, it's because it's not to the same extent, but who's that?
The fact that you have to say who's that actor.
You're right, but that's only in masterpieces. He's in the Godfathers and other Coppola films. But he has a few credits to his name.
Not James Caan.
No,
star of Elf. But like, yeah, the ratio of how many movies were you in to how much of a household name are you through those movies. I mean, Bruce Lee takes the cake on that one, I'd say.
John Cazale or John Cazale.
See that name doesn't ring a bell. I'm sure I'd recognise the face. I'm sure he is in excellent movies.
These are the only movies he is in. The Godfather.
I've heard of it.
The Godfather 2.
Good.
Dog Day Afternoon. The Deer Hunter. The Conversation.
Him. I see. Now I can visualise him. Now I know exactly what he looks like because of Dog Day Afternoon.
Obviously, The Deer Hunter is a bad movie, but all the rest of them are very good. The Deer Hunter, which sucks.
I've still not seen. Is Bruce Lee in that one? Bruce Lee versus the Deer Hunter.
Yeah. Yeah, I can, because I can think of like kind of like niche examples of this person
niche examples.
is great. Like,
and they only did a certain number of films, but.
Yeah, like Charles Lawton as a director, for example, like comes to mind, and being like, and that film obviously has like a huge impact on cinema, and you see a clip of it in Promising Young Woman of all kind of things. So there's kind of like that element. But there are very few people that are as big as Bruce Lee or as well known as Bruce Lee anyway. And I think
true.
it's the multimedia, cross-media kind of like icon appeal of Bruce Lee, maybe.
It's the idea of Bruce Lee. He's like Batman, he's like Guy Fawkes in
He's Elvis.
He's Elvis. Yeah, he's a poster. He's a poster for a genre, like a culture. Yeah, absolutely.
When you think martial artist, you think that yellow jumpsuit, you think those sounds, and you think blood scratch.
At the end of Soul Brothers of Kung Fu, he's wearing a tracksuit that is very much evoking the tracksuit from Game of Death and Enter the Dragon. And you can't really walk into any sort of martial arts affiliated school or, whatever without there being a poster of Bruce Lee. Even though the man, his legacy ended in the 70s, or began in the 70s, really, with
James
the
Dean
from it. Jimmy Dean, that's a very good shout. So Bruce Lee should fight James Dean.
Well, they are making that James Dean movie, aren't they, starring James Dean?
As in like a hologram, or
so I think maybe they've said they're now not doing this because it was such a staggeringly bad idea. But they announced that they were struggling to cast James Dean because how to cast James Dean, so they said they're going to cast James Dean as James Dean. So they're going to do a CG James Dean, and I think now they've backed off from that. So hopefully,
this is the Peter Cushing effect, the Grand Moff Tarkin effect or the Leia Organa effect of we've got all this footage of the actors from behind the scenes and blooper reels. We can just use AI to make that a movie now. Bruceploitation never got that far. Bruceploitation was like, this guy looks a bit like that guy, and if we use it using this camera,
what's limited by tech though, right? So
100%. If tomorrow some Hollywood tycoons were like,
Timothy Chalamet exploitation, if it was the Chalamet exploitation,
Wonka 2
but that's the idea of like that's
Call Me By My Name Again, Your Name.
But it's got to be someone that's got a fanatical fan base.
Yes,
That just want that.
It's it's just like this. Bruce left them wanting more by only having 5 films, and the industry said, "Well, let's give them hundreds of different sort of films in the same style."
Well, that's the sad thing, isn't it? Though that the person has to die young for it to be big in that way. That's the James Dean and Bruce Lee crossover. It's
that's very true.
Bruce Lee didn't sell out, so to speak. Wasn't in stuff enough. It's like, okay, you're in a few bad movies, and that one wasn't great, and all that. He didn't like. I mean, I know you love Jackie Chan, but Jackie Chan is in a whole range.
Oh God, Bruce Lee's lowest is nowhere near as low as Jackie Chan's lowest. But different circumstances.
And because the realities of show business would have been in stuff that was just, at least people would have not liked. I mean, others would have been like, "Oh, this is great actually," but there wouldn't have been that consistent level of all bangers.
This is the the five finger punch of Bruce Lee. These are the 5 films you need to see from him. I would recommend checking out, just to see them as cultural objects, and you can see the influence they've had on action cinema, and especially Hong Kong cinema in general. And they're all 90 minutes long, and he fights Chuck Norris. I
never really thought there was that few of them.
Again, I've seen more documentaries on Bruce Lee than Bruce Lee made movies.
Yeah.
I've seen more Bruceploitation movies than Bruce Lee ever would have made. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's been a fascinating dive into the weird and wonderful world of Bruceploitation. You can find lists on Letterboxd with literally hundreds of titles. I've pointed to a few in the recommendations episode. If you ever want to see Bruce Lee fight a gorilla, Bruce Lee in New Guinea, that's where you want to be. They're all on YouTube as well. That's the best things about these bootleg productions, is they're so accessible.
It does feel like what if Bruce Lee was Godzilla, doesn't it? It does feel
like the Godzilla exploitation. Godzilla fights Bruce Lee, fights Ultraman, fights Kamen Rider, fights Superman. There's a film called Bruce Lee Fights the Supermen, I think, maybe.
Is Gamera Godzilla exploitation?
Maybe, because what was the studio, not Toho, but the one that did Gamera, begins with a D. Was it begin with a D? That's very much capitalizing on the success of Godzilla and the kaiju boom.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, it became its own thing, but that's just how things work, The monkeys were the Beatles, but then the monkeys were the monkeys. So that has been a strange dive into the Bruceploitation genre. Thank you so much for listening. Please check out some of these strange and weird movies.
Yeah, generally you can just throw them on, and we've not really kind of broken them down.
You can't
they're not really spoilable anyway. but really worth seeking out. And I mean, you've listened at this point, so I'm not going to tell you to listen back. But yeah, this is an interesting part of cinema that's worth diving into.
Absolutely. And if you want some Staxploitation, you can head over to www.patreon.com, where we exploit ourselves for money. Podcasts and
every now and then I've got into the habit of dropping some voice notes up, so if you want to
unedited, unfiltered Stephen, so if for some reason you don't want my meticulously edited podcasts, you can listen to Stephen like rustle his phone in his pocket while he's on the train and talk about Knock at the Cabin.
I sit in my car outside of the cinema and I'm a hand talker, I wave my hands as I speak. And I'm holding that phone in my hands, and I'm talking about Magic Mike Last Dance, the second best Magic Mike movie, and I'm telling you how it is.
So yeah, that's the two sides of the Stax coin. You get these prim and proper 40-minute episodes edited down to a science, or you get Stephen's voice memos. So those are the behind the Patreon wall. Yeah, we've got loads of podcasts, videos, essays, all sorts of good stuff coming to that this year. Please stay tuned and locked to the Stax feed. We've got office hours and Kino thanks and other good things coming very soon. We hope you've enjoyed this little dive into Kung Fu February.
Is this the podcast where we reveal what next month is?
Yes, it very much is. And you're taking the lead because this is very much your idea. Not that this one wasn't your idea, but this one was very much your idea.
I'll let you pick one for the next month.
April. Oh, yeah. I've got one for April.
Awesome.
I have one in my head for April already.
Is it apes?
It genuinely is April.
Yes, good.
We're going to watch loads of monkey movies.
Cool, yeah, I'm down for that. So March is... It's not Gamatra. I thought you're thinking, isn't it Gamatra?
It's not Mark's Madness either.
And it's not Mark's Madness. It's March Night Shyamalan.
Name first, concept later. I love it. So yeah, we'll go through some of the ones we've not seen.
Yeah, I think so.
Most of his now.
Because I think the good thing about M. Night Shyamalan is it gives us Kino thanks material. It gives us commentary material. It gives us just like some little interesting films to talk about. We can talk about... So yeah, I'm going to plug the holes in his filmography that I have not seen. I might revisit some of his key films because I've not seen The Sixth Sense in a long time.
I've not seen Sixth Sense in a long time. And films like Unbreakable. I haven't seen Glass. I didn't like Split. I didn't like a lot of his movies, to be honest.
So I've not seen Split or Glass, so I'm excited. And I've been not watching Split purposely because it looks distasteful.
Yes, it is. Exactly. So I think we'll definitely do Split in some capacity because I think you'll have a lot to say about it.
I'm really excited to watch The Happening. I'm really excited to watch Lady in the Water.
I have seen neither of those.
I'm really excited to watch Avatar.
I have seen Avatar, but yeah.
I think he's a really faceted filmmaker, and this was just spurred on.
Oh, and we're doing a commentary track on Stuart Little, which he wrote. And we need to talk about that for an hour and 40 minutes, or however long Stuart Little is.
He's an enigmatic filmmaker to me that I like wrapping my head around because he is so much more interesting. Like, he is part modern Spielberg, part modern Hitchcock, and then just like, but what are you doing?
Just like director from space, like beamed from another planet. He's a visionary. He has a very distinct
such a technical, brilliant filmmaker, like such a brilliant, talented filmmaker that mostly makes bad movies, but makes them really, really well.
He's the king of the bad.
Just because Look at the Cabin, which if you listen to the Patreon thing, I had conflicting thoughts about. But I'm like, this movie is so well put together. And even Old, which I think is a terrible movie, you're like, this is full of choices. This is full of choices.
The craft is there. It's just
I don't like the craft in it, but it's intentional.
It's there. It's crafted. So yeah, M. Night Shyamalan, March Night Shyamalan, coming to a podcast feed and a Patreon feed near you. As always, we appreciate any and all feedback and interaction with this here little podcast. You can email us at thestacksonfilm@gmail.com. You can tweet us. You can DM us on Twitter or Discord or wherever you find us. If you see me in the street, just walking down the streets of Nottingham, just say hi. Don't ask me about Bruceploitation because I'll chew your ear off for an hour. So thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode. But
until then, beyond that point, and now, at all points you'll